The Israeli Air Force bombed a United Nations observer post in southern Lebanon, killing 4 UN monitors. The UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan says the direct hit on the observer post appeared to be deliberate. Israel denies having targeted the UN post. It expressed deep regret, but said Mr. Annan's comments were premature and erroneous.
The Security Council says it's shocked and distressed by the Israeli bombing of a UN base in Lebanon that killed 4 UN observers. But at Washington's insistence, it didn't condemn the bombing, which Israel says was an accident.
Israel has expressed deep regret at the killings, but denied accusations that it deliberately targeted UN positions.
From day one of this crisis, we've been talking to the UN, to their personnel, trying to make sure that UN personnel are not in fact caught up in the fighting and to guarantee their safety. Now, this tragedy is being thoroughly investigated, but I can say here and now, Israel would never deliberately target UN personnel.
The urgency for some sort of truce was underlined by the killing of 4 unarmed UN military observers in southern Lebanon. The observers from China, Finland, Austria and Canada died when their building was hit by an Israeli bomb. UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan condemned the attack, saying that it was apparently deliberate.
We want to be clear that it was not a deliberate attack, because Israel will never targeted and will never target United Nations forces.
The UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan accused the Israelis of ignoring repeated appeals to stop the attacks.
That shelling of the UN position, which is long established and clearly marked, started early in the morning and went on till after 7 p.m. when we lost contact. And our people on the ground were in touch with the Israeli army, warning them, please be careful, we have positions here, don't harm our people, and many calls went out until this happened. And you can imagine the anguish of the soldiers and the men and women, unarmed military observers who were down there in the service of peace.
Was the United Nations post at El Khayyam really targeted deliberately? It was occupied by 4 UN monitors from Austria, Canada, China and Finland. The UN says that when they came under heavy fire from the Israelis, they made 10 calls to Israeli commanders, warning that they were in danger. Then an Israeli jet dropped a precision bomb which destroyed the post.
It is not part of our policy. It is not part of our values.
As I said, it is the second time, at least as far as I recall, that Israel targeted a United Nations post.
Israelis are hitting practically anything that moves on the road, including a couple of Lebanese Red Cross ambulances 2 nights ago, many civilian cars and so on.
The UN Security Council has issued a formal response to the killing of 4 of its observers in an Israeli air raid on Tuesday. Its statement expressed shock and distress at the bombing, but pointedly stopped short of directly blaming Israel for the attack. Well, let's go live now to UN headquarters in New York. We can speak to the BBC's Daniel Lack. Daniel, much is missing from the original statement as drafted.
Absolutely. The original statement was drawn up by China and others, and first thing it did was reflect the Secretary-General's words in Rome a couple of days ago that the bombing, the attack on the UN post was apparently deliberately targeted. That's completely gone, of course, and the UN has backed away from that itself. But what's also not there is a call for, a really strict call for all the parties, Israel in particular, to respect international law, abide by its conditions. There's not a call for a joint investigation, the UN and Israel into this. And in fact, the Chinese ambassador to the Security Council himself, who's been fighting for a tough condemnation for a couple of days, said this resolution was watered down. But he did welcome it and say it had to be issued.
This is presumably a reflection of the power struggle in the Council between China and the US. China hinting that it could affect future Security Council business.
Absolutely. In fact, the Chinese ambassador, just before this final agreement came out about this statement, emerged from a council meeting, or at least private talks with the United States, and said one country, he didn't name names, is resisting the will of the others. And he said this could very much affect future business, and they've got important matters ahead. They've got to consider what to do about Iran's enrichment of uranium, whether to impose sanctions or at least threaten the Iranians with it. China wasn't really in favor of that from the beginning, and we're waiting to see how it affects negotiations on this within the Security Council.